Hey, what's up, Tom? I'm just working on the reggae beat, and I just came across a problem, so I thought I'd share it with you. All right, so I have this little melody here. Is there any way I could just automatically know what note should I put in to make it a chord or something like that? When I'm creating these chords, I automatically put like all majors. If it starts with A, it'll be A major, B major, D major. But I saw in some songs that they're switching from major to minor chords. How the fuck do you do that? We're all started with clicking some notes. And I feel like I'm more used to clicking notes than playing notes. As you click notes, you're trying to make it like some mathematics shit, like that will fit, that won't fit. But what happens in your head when you're saying, yeah, I'm in major chords, I'm gonna just put a minor chord there?
Okay, so it seems like Casey has three questions here, or three real areas that I'm going to address. What notes should I put in to make a chord? How do I know when to switch from major to minor chords? And he also feels bad about clicking notes and using mathematics to work stuff out. I'll say bullshit to that. That's brilliant to do that. And I'm going to show you how I do that, just clicking notes, and how I'm going to work out the answers to Casey's questions. So the answer to all of Casey's questions comes from one thing, and that is the key in which he has written his piece in. So if we take Casey's melody here, and we take the notes that he's playing D, A, B, G, and A. If we take those notes and just click them and insert them here, D, G, A, and B. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw a scale. The most important thing to understand about a scale is that it is a pattern, and it repeats this pattern no matter what note you start on. Every major scale has the same pattern. So let's take D, because that's the first note Casey plays, as the starting point for our scale. Now a major scale has the pattern of spaces between the notes. So if I was to go up a semitone and click a note, or a half note, I would play a D sharp. If I was to go up a tone or a whole note, it would be one semitone, two semitones to the E. Now a major scale has the following pattern. From your first note, you're going to go up a whole note or a tone. You're going to go up again from there, a whole note or a tone. Go up a half note or a semitone. You're going to go up a whole note or a tone. Go up a whole note or a tone. Go up a whole note or a tone. And then you're going to go up a semitone or a half note. This pattern is the same no matter what note I start on. So this is a D major scale. If I wanted to play an E major scale, I would just move the whole pattern up two semitones. If I wanted to play a C sharp major scale, I would just move the whole pattern down to begin on the C sharp. So we have a major scale pattern here. My aim now is to find out which scale Casey's notes fit into. So if I move my scale pattern over next to Casey's notes, you can see they actually fit into D major scale. Is there another way of fitting these in? Well, if we move it all down two semitones, you can see they also fit into a C major scale. So we could use the key of C major. We could use the key of D major. Are there any others we could use? We could also use the scale of G major, because you see that the D here, if I was to play it an octave higher, would also fit within that scale. So we have a choice here of which scale we want to use. I'm going to use D major because quite often pieces, loops, beats, they start on the first note of the key, because that introduces the key we are in. It prepares our ear so we can hear the rest of the song in the correct key. In popular music, this is very common to start on the tonic note or the first note of the scale or key in which you're in. So assuming we're in D major, this D major scale on the right here is going to be our tool to build our chords. Now Casey's first note is D. If I want to build a chord on D, I have the option of selecting notes from within the scale. The most common chord you build is a triad. And a triad is built by jumping over a note in the scale, but only using notes in the scale. So you start on the D, You go to the next note E, you jump over that, you don't use that. You go to the next note F sharp, you jump over the next note, which is the G, you don't use that, and you go to A. We now have a triad on D. His next note in his piece is G. So we're going to use the same method. We're going to build a triad on G. So from G, I'm going to go up one note in the scale, which is A. I'm not going to use that. I'm going to skip a note. I'm going to go to B. So B is the next note. Then I'm going to go up one. I'm not going to use the C sharp, but I am going to use the D. The next note in his melody piece is A. Again, we're going to use the same process. So A, we go up one. We're not going to use the B. We're going to use the one above, the C. We're going to go up one to D, and we're at the top of our scale. So what do? Well, scale is a repeating pattern. So we're going to go back down to the D at the bottom here. Remember, we're going from C sharp to D, so we're going to skip that D, and we go up to the E. So building the next note, C sharp, D, E. And then from the B, we're not going to use the C sharp, we are going to use the D. We go back around to the bottom, we're not including the D because we've just used that. So the E, we're not going to use that because that's the next note. We're going to skip that, so we've got the F sharp. I've now built a triad on each of these notes using the scale. One interesting thing to note about harmonizing the notes in Casey's melody is that we can take the melody notes as the root note of the triad or the first note, but we can also take them as the middle note or the top note of the triad. So I could delete all of these harmonizations of triads where I've used the D, G, and A and B as the root note, and then I could harmonize them by having them all as the middle note, using the same counting technique of before and using the scale to count the notes. Or I could harmonize them with the melody notes at the top note of the triad. Casey's next question is about how do I know when to switch from major to minor chords? So what is a major chord and what is a minor chord? In the form of a triad, which is a 3-note chord, a major chord has a pattern, and that pattern repeats no matter what key or where you play the major chord. Let's use C as an example. If C is our first note, and we call this 1, we're going to go upper semitone to 2, upper semitone to 3, upper semitone to 4, and upper semitone to 5. The space between the first 2 notes in the major triad will be 3 semitones. The distance is 5 semitones if you include the note that it's on and the note you're getting to. So we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that is our first interval distance between the first 2 notes. Next one we count up, if we start on the E, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have our major triad here, which is the pattern. The distance between the first note and the second note is 5 semitones, and the distance between the second note and the third note is 4 semitones. No matter where we put this, it will be a major chord. A minor chord is the same process, but instead of having a gap of 5 semitones between the first 2 notes, we have a gap of 4 semitones. So from C, which is 1, we've got C sharp, D, D sharp, which is 4. We then have a gap of 5 semitones between the second and the third note. And no matter where I put this major pattern, no matter where, I will play a major chord. I can play a major chord on B. I can play a major chord on A. I can play a major chord on E. And you get the idea. The same with the minor chord. No matter where I play this, I will get a minor chord sound. If I move it up to F sharp, move it up to A. Now, Casey's asked me about when to switch from a major to minor chord. And what I want to show you here is how a major chord pattern fits into the scale. So if I start on D and I made a major chord, you see all the notes fit within the scale. They are all included. If I move it up, so I start the major chord on E, you'll see the G sharp does not fit in that scale. It is not a member of the scale. Therefore, that major chord on E would be outside of the key, and it would not sound as good as a note, as a chord made within the scale. F sharp, if I made a major chord on F sharp, you see the middle note, the A sharp, it's outside of the scale. It doesn't belong in that family. I can make a major chord on G and it's within the scale. If I've made a major chord on A, you'll see if I put this E an octave lower, it is within the scale. If I do the same process with the minor pattern, you see that a minor chord on D won't fit. A minor chord on E does fit. A minor chord on F sharp does fit. A minor chord on G doesn't fit. There is a pattern within the major scale where a chord made on the second, the third, and the sixth will always be minor, whereas a chord made on the first note, the fourth note, and the fifth note will always be a major. You build the chords from the notes in the scale. That's the most important lesson. So to answer Casey's question of when to switch from a major to a minor, it would depend on how he wants to harmonize his notes in the melody. Let's take D for example. If he chose D to be the bottom note and he harmonized it, using our skipping one note pattern to create the triad, it would be a major triad. You can see that because the spacing is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4. If he took D to be the middle note and he used our same construction technique of skipping a note in the scale, we would go from D, C to B, and we would go from D to F sharp. And you would now see that we've harmonized this as a minor chord because the gap is B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is now a minor chord. So we can choose to harmonize one note several different ways depending on where we place that note in the harmonization. I hope you have enjoyed this video and learnt a lot. Don't forget to check out Sonicallys.com for some awesome free shit. Subscribe to catch my next video and please drop me a comment if you have any questions.